The Lockheed Constellation, affectionately known as the Connie, was frequently hailed as the Queen of the Skies. It stood among the most sophisticated airliners of its generation. Its graceful, sweeping lines lent the aircraft a unique elegance and quiet sophistication. The Constellation marked the pinnacle of piston-powered airliners and set new standards in both commercial and military aviation. Since 1912, Lockheed had earned a reputation for building reliable and comfortable airplanes. They were also linked with aviation icons like Wiley Post and Amelia Earhart. Lockheed further employed two men who formed what may have been history's finest engineering partnership. These were Paul Hubbard and Kelly Johnson. The company created a wide range of speedy, successful twin-engine aircraft. The Electra and Lodestar accommodated 10 to 18 passengers in considerable comfort. Following the 1935 debut of the revolutionary 21-seat Douglas DC-3, Lockheed launched the Model 14 Super Electra. This twin-engine, 14-seat model was larger and significantly faster than earlier Electras. In 1938, the eccentric millionaire Howard Hughes flew a modified Super Electra around the globe with a skilled team in a record-shattering 3 days and 19 hours. That incredible feat endured for many years.
If I've seemed to be in too much of a hurry to wait and pose for your pictures, it's not because I'm high-hat or anything like that, but just because I've been terribly worried that I wouldn't get out of here before the weather changed. I had a good break in the weather yesterday, and I've lost that, and I suppose it'll be fair today, but I've been in an awful rush to get away from here, and I hope you'll forgive me.
Oh, you bet.
Lockheed produced 112 Model 14s, with 119 more manufactured under license in Japan. Though quicker than the DC-3, the Super Electra was smaller and ultimately fell short in competition. But before and after World War II, the DC-3 dominated the twin-engine transport scene, and following the conflict, the Model 14 faded from airline service. Succeeding the Model 14 was another design, the Lockheed Model 18 Lodestar. It featured Electra wings and tail, but with a lengthened fuselage accommodating 15 to 18 passengers. Despite its increased capacity, the Lodestar still couldn't rival the DC-3's success. Shown here is a beautiful Model 18 Lodestar equipped with a Howard 250T conversion, modifying it into a tricycle landing gear aircraft. Its streamlined, lengthened nose was designed to house the retractable nose gear assembly. Only 4 such conversions were done on Model 18s, and just 2 examples survived. The Lodestar also sports a luxurious interior, styled for executive travel. It soon became evident that aircraft would need to transport far more passengers across longer routes. Lockheed, already preparing for this need, developed the Model 44 Excalibur, able to seat 36 travelers. When Howard Hughes contacted Lockheed on behalf of his struggling carrier TWA, he had a clear and ambitious vision. He wanted a plane that could fly 6,000 pounds of payload non-stop from New York to Los Angeles within 8 to 9 hours. Hughes envisioned a 4-engine pressurized aircraft flying at more than 300 miles per hour. His chance with TWA emerged when Boeing failed to deliver on 5 Model 307 Stratoliners. At the time, TWA needed financial support and innovation, prompting contact with Hughes. He demanded one strict term for the project: total secrecy. Only a small group of individuals worked on the project, and any written materials were personally destroyed by Hughes. Everyone involved remained silent, fearing that even small bits of information might be combined to uncover the new aircraft. When Lockheed finally showed Hughes the design, he approved and placed an order for 40 Constellations known as the Model 49 through the Hughes Tool Company, an initial investment valued at an unprecedented $18 million. This strategy avoided public disclosure. Hughes also insisted Lockheed could not sell the Connie to other carriers until he had received 35. This gave TWA a 2-year lead with the world's fastest passenger plane. It helped that Lockheed had never produced a large airliner before. The engineering team began with a blank slate, which led to the Connie's unconventional but effective design. Its large engines turned slowly, reducing stress and the chance of failure. So the design included big propellers alongside these engines. Such propellers required high clearance from the ground, so the nose gear had to be tall and the nose angled downward. The turbulent airflow from the propellers would have made a conventional single tail ineffective, and a single tail large enough to compensate wouldn't fit inside standard hangars. So, in an elegant solution, Lockheed curved the fuselage upward, allowing its iconic triple tail to sit above the turbulence zone. The first Connie, however, didn't go to TWA. It was delivered to the U.S. Air Force instead. The secret project became known when World War II broke out. During inspections by the War Production Board, officials, expecting a more conventional design, were shocked when they encountered the Constellation. It was clearly a revolutionary aircraft. The Army Air Forces were so impressed that they placed an order for 40 Constellations, designating them C-69s, later expanding that number to 260. By the end of the war, however, only 22 were delivered. Because of wartime priorities, Lockheed couldn't produce aircraft for civilian use, undermining Howard Hughes's plan to rescue TWA. When the war ended, many questions arose. What lay ahead for Lockheed and TWA, and how would the Army handle the remaining C-69s? Numerous meetings were held to discuss future updates to the Constellation line, which would have to compete with the Douglas DC-6. At the same time, magazines and newsreels started introducing the public to Lockheed's new aircraft.
The air transport of tomorrow becomes the reality of today. The Constellation, America's newest land-based cargo plane, is ready for her first flight. Beneath her wings, a P-38 fighter plane looks like a toy miniature. Built to fly at 35,000 feet in the stratosphere, the big ship is said to be faster than a Zero fighter plane. Four powerful engines lift the sky giant aloft. A plane that can cross the American continent or the Atlantic Ocean in 8 hours with a full load. Forerunner of a mighty fleet.
Lockheed realized it had to loosen its restrictive agreement with Hughes or lose out in the burgeoning post-war airline market. A revised version of the Constellation might give them the edge, but Hughes stubbornly refused to alter the terms. After unsuccessful attempts to negotiate, Lockheed adopted a passive approach. Eventually, the situation was resolved, and Hughes gave in. Though he was involved in post-war Model 49 planning, Hughes took no part in the technical negotiation about the Connie. He did, however, pilot the inaugural domestic flight of the Star of California on February 15, 1946, flying from Los Angeles to New York. His record-breaking flight time, 8 hours and 38 minutes, was compared in the press to the slower Douglas DC-4 flights. Suddenly, TWA had taken the lead. By war's end, Lockheed had secured orders for more than 100 Constellations from multiple carriers. Thanks to these crucial contracts, Lockheed was able to retain its skilled wartime workforce. The aircraft soon returned to its Lockheed Project designation, the Model 49, dropping its military title. At the same time, the 73 existing Constellations, along with modified C-69s, gave Lockheed a window to refine their design before launching a more advanced civilian version. The Model 649 took its first flight in October 1946. It represented a clear improvement over its predecessor, offering better sound insulation and climate control for passengers. While the 649s were still being delivered to airlines, Another version, the 749, was under development for long-range international service. This model was largely based on the 649, but included extra fuel tanks in the outer wing sections, increasing the range by 1,000 miles. The Constellation was regarded as the pinnacle of piston-engine airliners during that period. Its propeller technology was notably advanced. Thanks to fully reversible blades, it could slow rapidly during landings, and the props could be feathered entirely if an engine failed. Even in the event of a shutdown, the aircraft's engines were used so conservatively during regular flight that they could handle extreme demands when needed. Some pilots jokingly called the Connie the finest tri-motor plane ever made, as its temperamental engines often experienced failures in flight. When the 749 entered service, the military regained interest in the Constellation. The original C-69 had faced many technical flaws, leading the Army to cancel much of its earlier order. The military already had a fleet of Douglas C-54s, which had served effectively. It wasn't until 1948 that military interest in the Constellation returned. By that point, its previous design issues had been thoroughly resolved, and the Connie had established a solid reputation. The Air Force was then prepared to acquire its own version for military use. These aircraft were designated as C-121A. Only 10 units were ordered, intended to transport cargo and personnel. In 1950, the C-121As were sent back to the factory for upgrades, transforming them into luxury variants. These became known as VIP transports. One was assigned to General Eisenhower and named Columbine, while another was given to General Douglas MacArthur and named Baton. And you can learn more about that aircraft in the upcoming segment. When Eisenhower became president, another VIP Connie was designated for his use, named Columbine II. By then, Navy-operated C-121s had taken on expanded military duties, equipped with radar systems for specific surveillance missions. This ushered in a broader role for the Constellation as a large military transport. It also led to the development of a more advanced VIP aircraft for President Eisenhower called Columbine III, which remained in service through part of the Kennedy presidency. The history of the Columbine is notable, as it began life as the very first C-69 and was numbered 1961. This original aircraft started its career with the Army and was later upgraded with Pratt & Whitney engines. Following the war, the aircraft was offered for sale and purchased by Howard Hughes, who later resold it to Lockheed in 1949. Remarkably, this original aircraft became the prototype for the next evolution, the Model 1049. Known as the Super Constellation, it featured an extended fuselage lengthened by 18 feet, 4 3/4 inches, bringing its total to 113 feet, 7 inches. This crucial stretch was a direct response to fierce competition from the Douglas DC-6 and growing airline demand for more passenger capacity. TWA played a role in the Super Connie's development from the beginning. Nevertheless, Eastern Airlines submitted its order first and thus received the first delivery. Besides the added length, the aircraft was equipped with a more efficient wing de-icing system, larger fuel tanks, and upgraded engines. Altogether, 550 separate enhancements were made in the 1049's design. Although its gross takeoff weight rose by only 12%, the improvements were so effective that payload capacity increased by 40%. Passenger seating also grew, allowing up to 109 passengers, depending on how the cabin was configured. Once again, the Connie demonstrated its value and dominated the market on behalf of Lockheed, which aimed to maintain its lead. In modern times, any military would struggle with the presence of airborne command centers and radar platforms, so it's no wonder that the first versions of these roles were tested in the Constellations. When the U.S. Navy needed its first purpose-built airborne radar picket planes, it turned again to the Connie. These aircraft took over duties from earlier makeshift radar platforms adapted from converted World War II-era bombers. The aircraft operated with a 22-member crew, including radar specialists, engineers, and flight personnel. Before long, the Air Force joined in. Collectively, the Air Force and Navy used over 25 unique designations to categorize the different radar-equipped versions of the Connie. As Cold War tensions grew, having airborne radar capability became critical. However, the Connie's future was uncertain, as the arrival of jet-powered aircraft was clearly poised to transform aviation. Lockheed was determined to stay relevant and thus developed the ultimate constellation, the Model 1649A Starliner. With a completely redesigned, longer wing engineered for non-stop transatlantic range and many other major enhancements, the Starliner represented Lockheed's ambition to lead the long-distance commercial aviation sector. Unfortunately, it was an aircraft born at the very dawn of the jet age. Instead of dominating the skies, the Model 1649A languished in storage while airlines, with an eye on the forthcoming Boeing 707 and Douglas DC-8, kept placing new orders for the proven Super Connie. Even though the Starliner featured impressive upgrades that clearly made it the finest version of the Connie, only 44 were ever built. Most were quickly retired and replaced by more modern jetliners from competing manufacturers. TWA emerged as the primary operator of the Model 1649, ultimately acquiring 29 units. To gain interest from the U.S. Air Force, Lockheed had to dedicate extensive resources in terms of both funding and time. The spinning radar dome was just one system proposed for consideration. Combined with the Starliner's long-range, customized configurations and other enhancements, Lockheed stood prepared for any upcoming sales prospects. However, military budget limitations led to the termination of the armed services version of the Starliner. It was also becoming clear that the aging C-121 fleet would need replacement. Once the contest to replace the C-121s began, Lockheed realized the Starliner had little realistic hope. These suspicions were confirmed as the new project requirements were revealed. The Air Force now wanted a jet-powered aircraft, and Boeing was in the best position to provide one. They delivered, with the KC-135, a jet tanker made for the Air Force. With the C-141A's reliable service record, both the Air Force and Navy continued using it alongside Boeing's new aircraft. By spring 1965, the first U.S. C-141s had arrived in the Asian region. Constellations operated throughout the Vietnam War, making essential contributions. Their primary function was early warning from the air. While it was designed to usher in a new age of luxurious air travel, the Constellation's initial service was defined by military conflict. In Vietnam, its versatility was demonstrated yet again. Fitted with advanced, mission-specific electronics, they relayed data gathered from numerous sensors positioned along North Vietnamese supply paths. The cargo models handled medical evacuations and carried passengers. The Connies served as airborne surveillance platforms, alert to any bomber threats from the north targeting the south. Though this particular risk proved minimal, they still carried out many other missions that kept them in use during the war. When air operations began over the north, the Connie's radar functions became vital. Their role shifted from passive observers to active participants. On-duty MiGs were tracked and their locations relayed to American aircraft. This was countered by the deployment of American radar planes. Besides warning friendly aircraft of imminent danger, these radar planes directed strikes against enemy missile and radar sites. The final Constellation flights of the war occurred in May 1974. More than 25 years had passed since the first Connie had amazed the Navy, and over 31 years since the inaugural Constellation flight. Though it seemed the Connie would last forever, its era ended. The Connie was admired as one of the most beautiful piston-engine planes ever produced. It marked the dawn of a reliable, non-stop domestic and international air travel. The U.S. Armed Forces purchased 331 of the 856 Connies built between 1942 and 1958, while the rest were acquired by airlines worldwide. However, their service ended with the rise of jet airliners. Connies were retired well before they were worn out. Their days as major passenger liners and military transports concluded. They were relegated to short passenger routes, then to crop spraying and cargo duties. Fewer than a handful of flying Connies remain in the United States. Some appear at air shows nationwide. In 2024, John Travolta acquired the Super Constellation N6937C, ensuring an exciting new chapter in the history of this remarkable aircraft.
Well, my name is Stephen Hinton, and Rod got us to rebuild the Lockheed Constellation, so I was kind of one of the members of the project and kind of kept it on track. And we just did a successful flight, so we're really excited about it. It's been a 7-year project, so we're really proud of it.
Awesome. Tell me about those 7 years. What was it like going through that process and just kind of getting it to here?
Well, yeah, you know, we had a really good crew here at the Fighter Rebuilders, and we all teamed together, and you know, it's an exciting project. And you know, Rod Lewis has such a great collection of planes, and we know he'll use this airplane correctly. And
yeah.
but the project's all about there's so many people involved with it. I mean, everything from engines getting overhauled by, Mike Nixon, and, propellers coming from somewhere else, and all the work it takes to clean it up, and parts aren't even hardly available for the Constellation. And
Right.
that's why it takes so long to do this stuff.
So tell me a little bit about going through the flight today. What was it like taking off? How did she settle in? Talk me through the second y'all fired up those engines and got up in the air.
Well, we've run it, taxied it, and all that's kind of normal procedures. We have checklists, and Jeff is our new flight engineer, and we haven't flown with Jeff very much, so we're feeling each other out and how we do things. But Jeff's got a lot more experience in these kind of planes than Stuart and I do. But the excitement, rolling down the runway on takeoff, that's pretty exciting. After we had this thing all apart. We've had the landing gear out of it. We've had the outer wings off, had the tail off. All the engines have been off. We've rewired it, changed all the hydraulic lines. So to get it all come together and finally airborne, gear up, put the handle up, and the gear goes up, and you're looking at all the engine instruments. Everything's just purring away nicely. That's really exciting, And well, I'm riding co-pilot on this flight, and so my job is crew coordination. I'm holding the yoke while he's running the steering and the throttles, and then we transition. He grabs the yoke, and then I'm following with the throttles in a sense, keeping an eye on what's going on. And calling out speeds. And Stuart's flown a lot of big 4-engine airplanes before. I don't have a lot of 4-engine experience, and he's the man for the job. We're pretty light anyway. We're almost 50,000 pounds lighter than gross weight. And you could see how it landed short and how it took off real short. But it's a beautiful plane, and here again we want to thank the foundation, Rod's Foundation, for giving us the opportunity to put it together.
My name's Jeff Weitzel. I'm officially the luckiest guy on Earth because I just got to fly flight engineer again on the Lockheed Constellation, which was the first job I had when I was about 17 years old, which was about 150 years ago or so. And to be back in the Connie again is a real treat, and especially this example of the airplane is stunning. Honored, privileged, pinching myself, can't believe it. And what an effort on the part of our crew. All the folks who worked on this airplane, my hat's off. They did a wonderful job, and I'm a Johnny-come-lately, and I got to taste the icing, and I'm forever in their debt.
What does it feel like being here today and getting to watch your baby take
It
off?
was amazing just seeing it 8.5 years ago take off from Arizona.
Yeah.
And it was a hell of an event. 8 months to get it prepped so we could even take off.
Mm-hmm.
And then all this time outside, and then it got in the hangar a couple of years ago. And to see it fly today, it's amazing. It is amazing. Yeah, I don't have any words to describe it.
Yeah.
So it's the guys put their hearts in this.
Mm-hmm.
They, especially Steve and his crew, Pete, all the guys that were here working on this thing all these years, they put their hearts in it. So I'm just so happy that this day has come, actually. So
Yeah,
I didn't know
absolutely.
whether it would. It really felt right when we got in and started all 4 engines and did the run up, and everything checked out perfect. First time we were able to check the controls. It all worked perfectly. The servos were replaced, so everything seemed to fall into place, and then we all decided it's time. Well, first, General MacArthur, U.S. Air Force. So that's where it started, and then of course Lockheed. Before that, even. And I think I was really enamored with this airplane because of the history and then the condition it was in, and where we started with it.
So talk me through that. What was the reason? Why this? Why Connie?
I think we've done so many other aircraft. I've done one Mosquito, working on another Mosquito now with a partner, and we've done the B-25, the A-20. The A-20 was actually done here in Chino,
and just wanted something unique. And I like one-of-a-kind stuff, or one or two of a kind, you know. So this was rare. So we felt like, you know, let's just do something cool where we can all fly it, and we can all get in with our families and enjoy a warbird. So that's kind of the thing. And I just wanted to do something different, and I wanted to have an aircraft that really showed the big stuff during World War II and the Korean War, especially, and all the way to the 60s. So this one does it.
What to say? Now that it's all said and done, did it come to fruition the way that you anticipated it? Is it grander? Is it still coming together?
It actually looks better than I thought it would. Yeah, it actually looks better. Yeah, and we spent a lot of time with the paint job, the polish. They came to me with a budget for polishing, and I said, you know what, it's high as hell, but man, I want it polished. So I'm the one that they wanted to paint it. All the guys wanted to paint it, and I said, no. And I wanted an airplane like that one over there, but I couldn't polish the whole damn thing.
Yeah.
But and you know, there's a lot to this about honoring those who flew these airplanes, and honoring the guys who actually used them during the war as transports. And then this aircraft has special history with NASA. Not only General MacArthur history. This was one of the aircraft that was up in the air when Apollo spacecraft were flying, and this provided the communications as they went around the orbits. So this has a second life to it. It's very cool.
Push the top.
Airbus Constellation is holding at 3.5 to the northeast.
How far are you northeast, Constellation?
We're out here
8 miles.
8 miles.
Here we come.
Here we come. You want us to make a flyby?
Yeah, we're going to do one flyby and go land, and wind's 190 at Niner. Can you land on 3.6?
Yeah. I will take 3.6. We're heading inbound.
That's like a 10-knot tailwind.
It's a long runway. Yeah, don't go over 250 though, okay? But if y'all want to land the other way, I will. Yeah, you're flying this thing.
Well, you can request it if you want in the wind. Attention all. Watch your mics, folks. Watch them.
There you go.
Super Connie, how do you hear me now?
Connie's on a long right base for my 36.
It's direct to the runway, sir. Direct to the runway.
We are. Heading that way.
Well, we got something else.
You want to pull some power up?
Yep, I'm going to pull some power back.
Let's pull back to 25 inches for now. So what are you going to do after this? Just turn to the downwind?
I'm going to turn to the right and stay away from the...
and Connie, after the flyby, will be a right turn to the downwind for full stop.
Right turn to downwind, full stop, runway 36.
We're on base right now.
Okay, all the Corsairs hold short of runway 36. We got the Super Connie inbound.
Well, it ain't a super, but pretty super good. Super duper.
Attention, all Corsairs hold short of the runway.
I tell you what, why don't we just make this pass, turn out to the right, come back around, and land south, let the Corsairs go?
Yeah, and Constellation, you'd like us to make a pass, go to the right, let the Corsairs take off, and then we'll land to the south?
Sir, we have a program with them. I need you to make a right downwind and land as soon as you can on 36.
Okay.
All right, just do. We'll comply.
You're going to have to make a 180 on runway 36 to come back down to Papa 2.
Okay.
Right,
Okay.
Lining up good, looking good. Yeehaw. Corsairs taxi runway 18, hold short. Taxi 18, hold short, boss.
Watch the speed.
You out?
Watch the speed.
I got it.
Don't go to 270.
I'm 250 right now.
Yeah.
Nice pass. Turn, clear land, runway 36.
Okay.
Connie's clear land 36. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, if you can tell me your emergency brake pressure, I'll do the rest.
Is that you, Steve?
18. Yes, sir. 1800.
Parking brakes are off.
Parking brake is off.
Let's back her down there to about 25 inches.
25,
Less than that. Slow down.
JT, I'm going to land a Super Connie on runway 36, 180 on runway 18, back that to Papa 2.
You're not going to slow down like 45 back.
Okay, let's go on back to 22.
coming.
It is, because I'm going to throw the fucking gear out here.
Super Connie's going to land on runway 36, do a 180 on runway back down to Papa 2.
Then 170 per flaps.
Okay, sounds great.
145 per year.
Give me flaps.
Did you want to do one?
No, Steve's good at that.
Okay.
My fellow legacy guy.
Same ballpark.
Landing gear down.
Your handle is down.
And go to approach flap, please.
Approach flap selected. Nose gear. Bang, bang. Main gear down lock. Pressure's up.
Yeehaw.
Looking good, you guys. The right base is a good turn. Just keep the speed, the flap speed there.
Landing gear,
Gear's down locked.
check tier, 3 greens.
Right.
Hydraulic pressure quantities checked, mixtures are rich.
All right, I got the throttle.
Your throttles. And one more time, an emergency brake hydraulic pressure,
Flaps
please.
go.
Pressure's up, full flap.
Flap handle is full and flaps are going down.
We got plenty of drag.
Base leg, you got it. Now, no pressure here, boss. You know, I mean, nobody's
know.
watching. You just sneak right in.
I know.
Right on the number.
500.
Bark the dog.
I think I'll arm the reverse just in case something's weird. Okay, is that what you guys?
Yep.
Reverse is armed.
105 knots.
110 knots up here. You're looking good.
Give me a little horsepower.
What would you like?
Give me about 25.
You're at 30 now.
Okay, that's enough.
Yeah, you're right there. Perfect. Flare, flare. Got it.
All right.
Beautiful. Full the nose, full the nose.
I got it. Power off, I got the steering.
Woohoo!
I think you can make Papa 2 midfield here.
Not this, I ain't gonna make this one.
Uh.
I may make the next one.
On Papa 2 midfield.
Where's Papa 2?
Right up here. I hate
You want us to do 180 and come back?
Nope, you're going to make a left turn, the next taxiway up here to your left. It'd be perfect.
Oh, it's straight in.
Earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice job.
Wide turn here, Stuart.
I know, but I don't like hitting these brakes like this, guys.
JT, you can line up and wait when you're ready. He's left, turning left to Papa 2.
Okay, line up legacy.
Look at that. Awesome.
Anytime on the door.
Flaps up, clean up.
Let's make the turn here. I watch the pressure while I'm doing this. I'm watching it. Pressure's good. Looking for ground support here.
I'm looking for air.
Yeah.
Anytime on the door, JD.
Corsairs, JT, you have the airspace, you have the runway. You call it.
I'm looking there. He's
Cleared
got it
takeoff.
right
Yes,
there.
sir.
That's my girl.
Wow. Fantastic. Man, you did a great job.
We're all at it. Yeah.
Are we putting the collared shirts on?
Yeah. We can.
Watch the props unwind too.
Okay, we're stopped. I'm gonna hold the brakes till I get a chalk sign. Guys,
Shutting down on your command.
congratulations. Y'all did it. And shut them down.
1 and 4.
Congratulations, man. Thank you.
Hello everybody, we're here at Oshkosh 2023 and I'm standing in front of the Lockheed Constellation known as Bataan. It was a C-121A that had been used as a cargo plane for the Air Force originally, and then it was one of 6 that they modified as a VC-121. And this particular one, a very historic airplane, was General Douglas MacArthur's airplane. It became part of a pool of VC-121s used with generals and dignitaries. And you know, if you look at it now, and it's a gorgeous airplane, but it was like from outer space back in those days, if you can imagine. You know, it was as fast as any airplane flying in the 40s, and long range. You know, it's got a 16, 17-hour range, 250 miles an hour. It's quite an airplane. What does it take to get to Oshkosh? Well, I'd say this whole project started with the Legends Foundation 8 years ago. And the airplane hadn't flown in 20 years, and we did a complete restoration on the airframe, including new engines, rewired, went through the whole thing, and we've just been flying it now maybe 6 weeks. Our trip to Oshkosh started out of Chino, California. Yeah, we took off out of there, went 6 hours, 13 minutes nonstop to Madison, Wisconsin. And we stopped there so we could stage ourselves for a Monday arrival. But we had an oil leak on number 3 that ended up costing us 2 cylinders to repair. But here we are. Stu Dawson was left seat on this trip. We trade trip seats every time, but Captain Stu was, we came in, did our low approach, 249 knots, and pulled up to the downwind, throttled back to about 25 inches on the downwind. First notch of flaps, 170 knots, gear at 145, turn base, you know, go through the checklist, 120 on short final full flaps, and then over the fence about 100 knots, and Stu just made a perfect little chirp little landing, and we didn't reverse, didn't need it. We did a little downwind, but still, the airplane's pretty light. It's at least 40,000 pounds under gross weight, and it's got a big wing and very controllable, real easy to fly. Beautiful machine, very, very, very complex for its era, but that was the state of the art.
3713, contact ground.
Sorry. And November Alpha is on the roll.
Roger. 4 highlights, here we go.
Let's go.
5 throttles.
You got them. Power's coming up. And don't worry about that one at all.
Badger 1 track.
Power set.
Badger 1
All
track,
set.
Departure roll, wind 17011, runway 18, clear to land, all advised on the cable.
Badger 1 traffic in sight, copy. Clear to land, runway 18. Roger, right landing, gear up.
A little funny story, we were at the end of the runway, cleared for takeoff. We shoved the throttles up to takeoff power and kind of looked at each other. The thing really accelerated. We were airborne in 1,500 feet practically. Surprising, but we were more, I think we were like 52,000 pounds lighter than gross weight. So it's actually, it climbs out very well, and it climbs out at 1,500 foot a minute at that weight. It just had a reduced climb power. So we were very surprised. You know, we're used to flying, you know, the big 4-engine airplanes are usually big, heavy, lumbering, slow climbing things. Well, this thing at the weights we're flying is pretty sporty. It's fun to fly. Okay, you can see we just entered the big cargo door. This is airplane came, it was built like this. And the interior right now is just something that was put together to accommodate the trip to Oshkosh. But the plan is that the foundation has designed an executive interior, and it'll be, they have most of the parts, made already up in Aero Metals up in Portland area. And it'll be a very plush environment here. You know, be leather and a conference room up ahead. Yeah, what you see here, like I say, was just done by the foundation, just so it could get us to Oshkosh. But you can see the quality of what's been built.
Yeah, these are the back seats that are going back in. There'll be 24 total seats, 24 total places. There'll be a bar somewhere in here, a conference room. I think the conference room is over here.
I think it is partially into that, yeah.
That's galley.
Yeah.
Galley, that's going to be a restroom. There's a conference table here, and bar back here, and then the rest is seated. Have that quality right there.
This is where it all happens up here.
Up here, and then we got a lot of automation here for just safety issues. This is a camera system that will show gear, engines, everything we need to be looking at. Steve, you probably know more about it.
Yeah, we have cameras around the outside of the plane, and we can select it here. And we also have the ability in the cockpit to select.
Go ahead and jump. Now this is where it all happens. So you got a captain, you got a pilot, you got a co-pilot, you got an engineer.
And you can see the airplane's built for the engineer. He has most of the responsibility. Well, we work as a crew, and like I say, we trade legs. You know, Stu and I both fly. But as a co-pilot, you know, we're watching what's going on and try to make sure we're crew coordinated. But the function I have, for instance, is I could pump the landing gear down if it needed to go down in emergency, or if we lose hydraulics, I could pump the brakes up, and just follow in conversation. You know, sometimes it takes two to do things. We had early on, we were working on some landing gear issues, and it takes three guys, Jeff, and all of us are talking about what we think might be the issue, and it's a big airplane. Just take your time and talk about it. You know, or you ask what it's going to take. We did a budget, and it was $46,000 in fuel and oil to get here and back from Oshkosh. So that's a pretty big commitment, and people should maybe don't know that, but a lot of respect to Rod and the foundation for pulling through on this, and to me, it's been one of the, like I say, we've done a lot of projects through the years. This one's been the most challenging by a lot, and equally as rewarding. And we've got a lot of people involved. We had some structural engineers involved to figure out how to do things correctly, and we hired a lot of outside help. They're just it's massive, a massive project, and it was really fun when we started turning the switches on and running the hydraulics and running the engines, and like I say, quite a thrill running down the runway the first time too.
But we're, just being here, we had many people come up to us and say, "Hey, I'm type rated in Connie's," and tell us stories about this particular airplane we've never heard of. So that's another reason to come to Oshkosh, because if we hadn't brought it here, we wouldn't hear all the history that we don't know.
Yeah. I have to tell you though, Rod, a lot of times I'll ask a specific question, like that I might need some help with, and they go, I don't know.
The foundation means my family, my kids especially, and I have two pilots, two daughters that are women pilots that I want to be able to continue this legacy. They're very interested, one especially that lives in San Antonio. So there'd be no way for them to be able to do this without me funding, how to keep these aircraft in the air after I'm not here or don't want to fly them anymore. So I think it was just to keep this going. There's some very unique airplanes. I have a lot of one-of-a-kind airplanes, and I just don't want that to disappear. And I'm sure someday it's going to be hard to get these airplanes in the air. It's going to be hard to find people, the young pilots that want to fly these things. They're getting up there in age. So I think mostly just to try to keep this going as long as we can, to educate those who don't know about this history. I've been involved in some very unique flying activities, It's a great thing to keep preserved. We're frustrated fighter pilots is probably what we are, those of us who weren't in the military like I wasn't, but I grew up as an Air Force brat, and I watched my dad do all these cool things and be in all these cool places and fly these incredible airplanes. And he went into the F-100 series program and flew 100 series airplanes. So, and he was a demo pilot, so I got to see some really, really cool stuff growing up. So that's probably my motivation is my dad, you know.
Well, you ask why do they always call on me? They don't always call on me. We've got experience, you know, we've been doing this for a living. You know, I've been flying warbirds since the 70s. This is my 50th year at Oshkosh. And we've got an experienced crew and a good relationship. This is our 43rd airplane that Fighter Rebuilders has done since 1980. And we're really proud of it. And it's a challenge. Everything's a challenge. We have a great relationship with our customers and our friends, and get a lot of help from the warbird industry. And you know, just being here in Oshkosh, you know, people can show off their wares here. It's a great place to connect with people. You know, Fighter Rebuilders has been my line of income for 45 years anyway. So, you know, the Planes of Fame is where my heart is, but I mean, we have to earn a living, and we also need to keep support of the museum, so we keep a full-time crew working on other projects and they're available for the museum when they need it. But you know, my son Steven has grown up and he's the 2.0 version. He's doing a great job. He's got a lot of projects in line, and he's a perfectionist, and he'll up the standard and he'll up the quality of what's going on. I have to admit, back in the 80s, this was a lot easier than it was in the 90s, and you know, which is a lot easier than it was in the 21s, but now you know, parts are running out, the airplanes are getting older, and we have a new generation of people, and we've also lost a huge number of people that we had access to that had this experience. Well, this year, coming to Oshkosh, we were invited to partake in the Warbirds in Review, and unfortunately the airplane was still in Madison. We missed that, but it means an awful lot when people have interest in airplanes like this, and Connie and the group did such a great job as far as we're concerned. We had a lot of interest in the crowd, and it was fun to tell our part of the story. You know, it's a very historic airplane. Imagine what kind of deals maybe got done in the back of this airplane. You know, it spent a lot of time out in the eastern part of the world there, and a lot of those people had never seen anything like this before. You know, something from the United States this big and shiny, it made a big impression. Just kind of interesting. There's probably a lot of stories we don't know about that happened in this thing.
The Lockheed Constellation was one of the most important aircraft in rebuilding of the airline industry after the war. Often described as the Queen of the Skies, it was the most powerful and advanced airliner of its time. A combination of many technical innovations came together in a true success story. In addition, the distinctive curves of the fuselage and the perfect balance of the design made the plane a thing of beauty and grace. Large four-engine transports are not always aesthetic, but the Connie's lines demand admiration. The Constellation was the pinnacle of piston engine transport design and broke new ground in both civil and military variants. However, Its career overlapped into the jet age, and the appearance of new technology brought down a premature curtain on its lifespan. The Lockheed Company, with a heritage stretching back to 1913, had painstakingly built up a reputation for constructing excellent and trustworthy passenger aircraft. Commencing with the Vega and following up with the Orion, Lockheed's reputation blossomed. They became associates with the famous names of aviation between the world wars. Wiley Post and Amelia Earhart both flew Lockheed aircraft. The second list of records set in Lockheed's planes grew rapidly. The company products were not simply a successful reworking of the day's technology, they were innovative and influential. Lockheed had a succession of talented designers. Jack Northrop was followed by Gerald Voltee. When both of these men had gone off to found their own companies, Lockheed retained the services of a team led by the greatest engineering double act in aircraft history, Paul Hibbard and Kelly Johnson. Lockheed developed an excellent family of fast twin-engine transports in the Electras and the Lodestar, carrying between 10 to 14 passengers and what was comparatively only moderate discomfort. In 1938, Howard Hughes piloted a Super Electra around the Northern Hemisphere in just over 3 days and 19 hours. Hughes' respect for Lockheed was cemented, and later he turned to the company into trying to fulfill his aviation ambitions. The flight, of over 14,700 miles, confirmed a view held by many, including Hughes, that civilian airliners would be the mass transit method for the future. And to do this, the individual plane would need to carry many more people over much longer range. Lockheed had already been working towards this with their Model 44 Excalibur. Designed to carry 36 passengers, they were more than receptive when Hughes approached them on behalf of his airline, TWA. His basic specification was an aircraft that would fly a payload of 6,000 pounds from New York to Los Angeles, non-stop, in 8 to 9 hours. He would be a 4-engined, pressurized, luxury airliner cruising at around 300 miles an hour. TWA had set the parameters for capacity and performance, but it was the Lockheed team which designed and built the plane. It drew on many successful elements of their earlier studies. The wing was expanded from that of the P-38 Lightning fighter. The triple tail, originally designed by the Douglas Company, had been tested in the Model 44 project. Kelly Johnson was intimately concerned with the new project. Here in the wind tunnel, cameras catch him changing the shockboard in one of the long series of model developments. Because the plane drew so much on the work done for the Model 44, it was initially referred to as the Excalibur. However, it acquired a new number, the Model 49, and soon was given a new name as well, the Constellation. Lockheed's main rivals had been leapfrogging each other in airline development, with Douglas reaping the majority of the awards in America along the way. However, they did not have a client with the determination and checkbook of Howard Hughes to support them, and their designs were transitional rather than attempting one giant step. Lockheed had conducted a lot of relevant research and development during the 30s, and this had equipped it well to approach the new design. The company had been involved in pressurization experiments with the Army, and Electra had been modified for the tests and given the Army designation of XC-35. The plane first flew on the 7th of May, 1937. With the information derived from these tests, Lockheed were able to devise the Constellation system. This maintained cabin pressure at ground level up to 9,000 feet and restricted pressure to that of 8,000 feet when the plane was at 20. The XC-35 was, in effect, a practical advantage that Lockheed held over their rivals. In a similar way, a lot of expensive development of the wing shape had already been born in the design of the Lightning. Even with these advantages, the cost per constellation quoted to Howard Hughes was, for the day, astronomical. Hughes' determination funded the development from its first meetings with the company in June 1939. However, its progress was slow. Many design problems needed to be overcome in reaching the stage where production would commence. Perhaps because the company had not built such a big aircraft before, Lockheed's team were very flexible about their approach. The series of decisions that set the Connie shape serves as an example. Large engines working at low revs were less likely to feel stressed and break down. So, a combination of such engines with large propellers were suggested. The large propellers demanded absurd ground clearance and very long forward undercarriage. To shorten that wheel strut, the nose is bent down. The large area of disturbance from the propellers suggests the triple tail will not work in flight. However, a more efficient single tail will not fit into a hangar. The solution? Curve the fuselage upwards and take the triple tail out of the propeller turbulence. The plane that results has a stringed S for a centerline in the side view of the fuselage. And it works. As a bonus, it's also beautiful. The first Constellation went not to Howard Hughes airline, but to the United States Army Air Force. War had swept up the US, and civil aircraft production had become another arm of the war effort. Wartime pressures delayed the Constellation further, but eventually, on January 9, 1943, Project 49 took to the air for the first time. The first plane was the production prototype. There was no transitional model. Existing commercial orders had been drafted even before the US entry into the war, and by 1942, the Army added orders for 300 of the type, most with a more powerful engine. Now being military aircraft, the first Constellations were given a military number. They became C-69s. The test series was delayed due to the trouble with the engines, and the first plane was not handed over to the US Army Air Force until July 29, 1943. In the time the plane was grounded, Lockheed and TWA took the opportunity to repaint it and do some publicity shots. Some of the testing was also conducted in TWA livery and was used for publicity. This was nothing compared to the publicity coup pulled off by Howard Hughes with the second machine. The plane had been delayed in production and made its first flight only in 1944. It was accepted by TWA on behalf of the military on April 16, painted in TWA's colors, though showing its military serial number. The following day, the plane took off with Hughes himself at the controls. It flew non-stop from Burbank to Washington, a distance of 2,300 miles and a record time of 6 hours and 57 minutes. This was an average speed of 330 miles an hour, a respectable speed for a fighter of that era. In addition to the successful publicity for Hughes and the TWA, the event spotlighted the Constellation to the mutual delight of Lockheed and the Army. After the record flight, the plane was kept in Washington for a week of displays and inspections before being delivered to the Army. Over the next 18 months, the C-69s were to make a number of significant long-distance flights and set a series of records. These included excessive transatlantic records, reducing flight time to Paris to under 10 hours. It was evident that the Army had found in the Constellation a valuable personnel transport. The C-69 could carry up to 64 fully armed troops, or alternatively, was capable of transporting a light tank or other medium vehicles. The underworked big engines returned excellent fuel consumption figures and combined with the plane's range, speed, and capacity to put the Constellation far ahead of its competitors. While this was not that relevant in 1945, it would be a telling advantage for Lockheed at war's end. Even though there was a clear need for cargo planes, the Army never placed a high priority on Constellation construction. Under Army direction, Lockheed concentrated on production of other warplanes. In addition to its own Hudson and Lightning designs, the company was heavily involved in construction of Boeing's B-17. Most of Lockheed's experience with four-engine planes during the war was with the Fortress rather than with the non-belligerent Connies. Lockheed produced many thousands of aircraft during the war, but only 22 of them would be C-69s. Army orders for hundreds of C-69s were never fulfilled. Only 15 had been delivered when the war ended, with another 7 planes almost completed. In addition to Lockheed's production being directed to other types, the Constellation used the same engines as the B-29 Superfortress, and few of the power plants were allocated to the program. The engines had teething problems, and the shortage curtailed production. Testing was disrupted with frequent groundings of all types using them. At war's end, 12 of the 15 planes delivered to the Army were declared redundant. All military orders were cancelled, and Lockheed paused to consider their options. The decision was made to go ahead with the Constellation as the company's primary product. In the anticipated post-war expansion of commercial travel, while their competitors tried to rebuild bombers into airlines or upgrade their pre-war designs, Lockheed were ideally positioned with a tested and proven aircraft that was very advanced in comparison to any other type available. By buying back C-69s from the Air Force, including those partially built at the factory, Lockheed were able to offer customer airlines new aircraft almost at war's end. Pan Am were the first to receive these refurbished Army planes, and the Connie made its first commercial flight on the 3rd of February 1946. 3 days later, TWA introduced its Constellation service, first on the transatlantic route, and then a month later commencing transcontinental flights in the US. Competing carriers were mostly relying on DC-4s, and the Connie had no problems outperforming the older Douglas plane. The efficiency of the Constellation was undeniable, and within 2 years, TWA's rivals on the transatlantic route had been forced to change to the Lockheed plane themselves. In effect, the Lockheed decision gave them an 18-month lead over their competitors at Boeing, Douglas, and Republic. This was clear to the airline operators as well. Within a week of the war's end, the company had orders from 8 airlines for over 100 Constellations. The contracts total over $75 million and allowed Lockheed to retain its skilled workforce as production of the Connies was stepped up. The original batch of ex-military planes was soon used up, and new examples started to roll from the factory. Though intended for civil use, they were still the basic C-69 as ordered for the Army. The plane had reverted from its military designation to the Lockheed project number. Thus, the basic aircraft was referred to as the Model 49. During the war, Lockheed had advanced 5 further studies for improved Constellation variants, and these were given an extra numeral. The first being the Model 149, second 249, and so on. One of these projects have been for a long-range bomber variant of the plane, but the other 4 were all transport versions, 3 being improved civilian airliners. There were 73 civil Model 49s, including the recycled C-69s. Their immediate availability after the war gave Lockheed the time to refine the Connie further, before releasing the first truly civilized version. For some carriers, the purchase of Constellations propelled them into the big league. KLM was one. As early as November 1946, they had transferred their transatlantic route to Lockheed Model 49s, and the Connies served the airline well from then to the mid-50s. By that time, KLM was a major world airline, with a massively expanded network of routes. Work on what was to be the first civilian production model had begun in May 1945. This was the Model 649, developed in conjunction with Eastern Airlines. Among the many developments introduced with this model was the SpeedPack external cargo bay. This was another example of Lockheed's team lateral thinking. A Connie offered little cargo space when laid out for maximum passenger carriage, but had the power to spare. To avoid cutting back on the number of passengers, additional cargo space was bolted to the outside of the plane. This increased the goods carriage by 8,000 pounds, at a penalty of only 10 miles an hour in speed. The model also introduced a new and more powerful version of the engine, rated up to 2,500 horsepower. The 649 first flew on October the 18th, 1946. It was a notable advantage on the Model 49 in many aspects. Major improvements have been made to soundproofing and cabin air conditioning, giving a far more pleasant ride than any other airliner at the time. Easton began to advertise their planes as their gold-plate Connies. They began operating services in May 1947. Overlapping with the deliveries of the Easton 649 came another new version, the 749. This had been developed as a long-range model for overseas operation, based closely on the Eastern aircraft. The outer wings contain additional fuel tanks, which added a further 1,000 miles to the range of the plane. With this version, the New York to Paris route could be flown non-stop. Further improvements to the 749 were recognized with the sub-designation 749A. Air India was the first to employ these, bringing them into service beside the earlier Connies then purchased. The improvements made to this version were directed to obtaining a higher gross takeoff weight, bringing an additional nearly 5,000 pounds to the payload. The weight of the Connie had grown markedly during her career to that time. The initial C-69 had a maximum weight of 72,000 pounds, but this had been expanded to 107,000 pounds with the 749A. At the same time, the range had been increased from 2,400 miles to well over 3,000. Many of the improvements made to these planes were later built into earlier models, blurring the distinctions between the earlier versions. The Constellation stood at what was to be the pinnacle of propeller-driven airliners. The technology of propellers themselves was very highly advanced. With its fully reversing blades, the Connie could pull itself up on landing in a very short time, or could back itself into a parking bay. The props could also be fully feathered to reduce drag if an engine cut out. Extreme use of the reversing props on landing produced this sort of spectacle, with the Constellation not only coming to a halt in a very short strip, but promptly backing up. The Connie's props then carefully matched to the huge engine chosen for the plane. The big blades caused some problems with the undercarriage in hoisting the plane clear of the ground, but these problems were offset by the advantages gained in flight. The big engines were run at very low revs, with no stress and minimum fuel consumption. They were quite capable of keeping the big plane aloft, even if two were cut out, and even if both of the engines on one side had to be shut down. By settling the plane to demand so little of its power plants in normal operation, Lockheed built in an enormous reserve. The 749, a specification had originally delivered from the renewed military interest. The original C-69s had been a problem aircraft for the Army, due in no small part to the experimental nature of design. The Army was well served by its large fleet of Douglas DC-4-derived C-54s, and abandoned the Lockheed plane. But when in 1948 the new U.S. Air Force turned its attention to the Connie, it was no longer a new design that pushed the state-of-the-art under wartime handicaps. This time, the Air Force bought a minor variant of the well-proven Airliner as a C-121A. Two were immediately redesignated as VIP aircraft and allocated to General MacArthur, who transferred the name of his old C-54 Bataan, and General Eisenhower, whose plane was known as Columbine. Later, VIP Connies were assigned to Eisenhower after he became president and were named Columbine II and Columbine III. The non-VIP C-121As were used as cargo and personnel transports, and had strengthened floors and large rear fuselage cargo doors. Over the next few years, the original Air Force order of 10 aircraft were all reconfigured as VIP planes. The first was delivered in December 1948, and the last in March 1949. They soldiered on for nearly 20 years of service and were not retired until the late 1960s. The return of the Constellation to Air Force service was followed by interest from the Navy, and a new military role dawned for the plane. The C-121's career was to be very long and very influential, and redefine the military use as large transport aircraft. By the time of the Columbine III, President Eisenhower's plane was a much different proposition from his first Constellation. In the development of this new type, the story of the Constellation returned to its beginning, to the first C-69 built. This had displayed its military number 310309. However, its company number had been 1961, and it was as old as 1961 that it was to gain its individual fame. During the war, the first Constellation had served its share of Army duty. During this period, it was re-engined with Pratt & Whitney radials, as an emergency-driven response to the chronic problems with the Wright double cyclone engines. After this refurbishing, the Army took to calling it the XC-69E, though it was otherwise unchanged. At the end of the hostilities, it was then put up for sale and bought by none other than Howard Hughes. In 1949, he sold it back to Lockheed, and a transformation began, as it was turned to the prototype for the Model 1049. The most obvious change was that the plane was stretched, and two new sections of the fuselage were built into it. One section before the wing added 10 feet and 9 inches, and the second behind the wing 7 feet and 8 inches. The alteration was so radical that the company marketed the plane under a new name, the Super Constellation. TWA had again been involved in the development of the plane, but Eastern Airlines had launched its actual order first, and so they received the first Super Connies. In addition to the obvious lengthening, there were many other improvements. A better de-icing system for the wings, stiffed wing surfaces, increased fuel capacity, and more powerful engines were all incorporated. The gross takeoff weight of the plane increased by only 12%, but such was the efficiency of the design that the payload increased by 40%. Seating was available to cater for between 69 and 109 passengers, as the Lockheed devised a variety of layouts. Some were designed for long-range carriers and others for commuter airlines. Other plans with fewer seats catered for routes with a higher proportion of freight, or allowed for the removal of fitting to use the aircraft as a part-time cargo plane when passenger traffic was light. The company's intent was clear. The Constellation had given them a captive market they did not want to lose. The new planes were assembled in Lockheed's appropriately named Hall of Giants. The first version had only a limited lifetime. It had been intended to give a new and revolutionary turbo-compounded engine, but teething problems with the new power plant that led to the use of standard, though uprated radials. The 2,700 horsepower delivered by these engines left a Constellation slower than its rival, the Douglas DC-6, and only 24 were built. Lockheed were forced to persist with the introduction of the more powerful but underdeveloped new engines. Though problems persisted, the strategy paid off and sales picked up. With the introduction of the new engines, the plane received a further 20% boost in its weight-to-range ratio. All comparisons with the opposition were addressed, and all orders resumed their earlier, partingly busy frequency. This beneficial change was in part forced on the company. They had had enough of unproven engines earlier in the Constellation's career. However, the military were very interested in an uprated Super Connie, and much less so in the underpowered original model. Not only did the re-engineering rekindle civilian sales, but the new Super Constellations were to be the testbed for a revolution in military aviation. Today, the concept of aerial command posts, electronic surveillance centers, and radar stations is commonplace. They've proved their worth in time, and again, during their short career. Most of the experimentation that proved their effectiveness was conducted in constellations, as was most of their early service. Again, old 1961 was involved in making aviation history. As with domes above and below, the original plane was used to trial the installations. The first Connies constructed as airborne radar pickets were built for the Navy. They replaced the earlier rudimentary installations aboard converted World War II bombers. Aboard the planes, a crew of 22 were involved with aircrew, radar operations, and engineers. With their long range coupled to the search range of the extensive load of equipment, these Navy WV-1s heard the worth of the concept and installed it as an accepted part of naval practice. Soon, the idea spread to the Air Force. The Air Force had placed orders for Super Connies for conventional use as transports, but C-121s would not be delivered as such until 1956. Before any transports could be built, the Air Force acknowledged their better use as an airborne early warning aircraft and changed the order for the first 10 to its own flying radar pickets as RC-121Cs. These planes are loaded with 15,000 pounds of radar equipment, with crews at 335 miles an hour up for 24 hours on patrol. The RC-121C was similar to early Navy Super Connies, with their height-finding radar housed in the 8-foot-tall hump, and the bearing scanner located in the ventral dome. The RC-121Cs entered service in 1953, and were mostly employed in patrolling the western seaboard of the USA. They were followed in 1954 by the first of an order for 72 RC-121D Warning Star aircraft. In addition to the passive role of detection, these incorporated offensive activity as the control centers for the guidance of fighter interceptors. From the basis of the Morning Star, a number of options presented themselves. Once, the idea of putting equipment into aircraft was suggested. There was a rush of ideas about which equipment might be suited for the treatment. Advanced electronics and surveillance types multiplied. As the transport planes appeared, they were often pulled back to the factory for refit as one or another of the electronics versions. The appetite of services for these valuable aircraft was insatiable. Over 220 of the main types alone were built, disregarding the one-offs and the small runs. Most of these planes were also completely re-equipped at least once in their lifetime. Between the Air Force and the Navy, over 25 different designations were used to identify versions of the radar-equipped Connies and their control center brethren. In addition to proving the concept and paving the way to their success, these constellations also performed very real service in an era when there was no other practical solution. At the height of the Cold War, when hostility and distrust often combined in equal degree to foreign policy, a calmer picture of reality was maintained by these electronic eyes in the sky. In 1962, the RC designation was changed to EC, and the electronic Connies were to earn their later Vietnam fame under that designation. They were a pivotal factor in the US defensive strategy, and had become as important as the cargo-carrying versions that were dispensable. Despite using non-standard fuel and requiring piston engine maintenance that was in almost dead arc form, the Connies were nursed along. Old age and technological redundancy could not undermine their essential functions, and some were to remain in service until the early 1980s. Their longevity was helped not only by their experts' care, but by the excellence of their original design and construction. The jet age was, however, drawing in on the Constellation's career. It was obvious that the introduction of the jet airliners would change the whole market expectation, and Lockheed were determined not to be left behind. Aware of the limitations of early jet technology, they set about refining a system of compound engines, or jet props, using jet engines to drive propellers. They had already extended the piston engine by the use of turbines driven by the exhausts. These had added 20% more power to the engines and with the peak of the piston engine development. Employing a jet and prop combination was designed to extract maximum economical efficiency from both technologies. Once again, the testbed for aviation milestone was old 1961. In its last major notable achievement, the venerable airframe was fitted with an Allison turboprop in the outboard starboard position. This engine couldn't save the Connie, but it was part of the foundation of one of Lockheed's most successful aircraft, the C-130 Hercules. It was also at the heart of the successful Lockheed Electra, which kept the company alive in the civilian market. However, for the Constellation, its success as the pinnacle of piston engine airliners somehow acted against anyone taking a jet-powered version seriously, even though the finest development, the Starliner, was yet to come. With a new wing shape and other major revisions, the Starliner carried Lockheed's hopes of continued dominance of the long-range airliner market. However, though orders for Super Connies didn't dry up immediately, there was no flood of orders for the new plane. Only 44 of the vastly improved version were built, phased out of service relatively quickly, being replaced by jets. The improvements made to the Starliner were numerous, and it was undoubtedly the finest piston engine airliner of all time, but it was too late. Lockheed's enterprise imagination and innovation continued to work around the Constellation, and several refinements, including the now familiar revolving antenna, were developed and tested with Connie's. The new development of the Starliner gave Lockheed a proposal to put the Air Force, and the company invested considerable time and money sorting out the best package it could develop around the plane. The revolving dish was only one of the systems developed for the submission. With turboprops, extended range, specialized layouts, and a large number of new features and improvements, the Starliner was being prepared for what would be the next sales opportunity. By then, the success of the airborne radar and control planes that the fleet of such an aircraft be maintained. The aging C-121s would need a replacement. By the time the competition was announced, Lockheed knew that no matter how excellent their proposal was, they didn't really stand a chance. Hot on the heels of the formal call for tenders came the specifications, and these confirmed Lockheed's fears. Time had stolen a march on the military Starliner as well as the civilian version. The Air Force was not just in the market for a replacement, but for their constellations to be more precise. They were in the market for a jet-powered plane. The Boeing company had the world's best such aircraft on its catalog. Developed for the Air Force as a jet tanker, the KC-135, the result of a foregone conclusion. However, the appearance of the replacement did not signal the end of the Connie's military career. Whereas the arrival of Boeing's jet had seen the quick demise of civilian constellations, the Air Force and Navy were content with the capabilities of the plane. And coincidentally, they had need of them. The U.S. Air Force C-121s, to be based in the Asian theater, arrived in Thailand in April 1965. Although Navy planes had been the first Connies involved, starting with the missions in August 1964 at the time of the Gulf of Tonkin incident, the Constellations flew throughout the war and their service was invaluable. They performed in a number of functions, some of which were developed and tested as a response to the armed combat raging below and in the air around them. The big plane's commodious fuselages saw many refits. The variety of constellations deployed to Vietnam illustrates the way the big planes had taken on so many roles for the services. Their main work was as an airborne early warning aircraft, but they were also used for a number of other missions. A few cargo versions were used primarily for aeromedical evacuation and as passenger planes. However, beyond that, the specialist electronic planes filled a number of roles. One of these was the relay of data from sensors scattered along the North Vietnamese supply routes as a part of Operation Igloo White. To have diverted the jets to these tasks when they were needed as refueling tankers would have been highly impractical, and the Connies, available and reliable, soldiered on. The Constellation's original deployment to Vietnam was essentially defensive. They were to be used to provide a radar picket to guard against North Vietnamese bombers attacking targets in the south. However, this proved to be a short-lived need, and the duties that kept them in the theater were over a broad spectrum. One of the most unusual roles the Connie was called on to perform fell to this plane, and in C-121J of the Navy's Development Squadron, PX-8. The designation was given to a group of planes that were variously modified to secret specifications. There was no conformity within the designation. It was effectively a grab bag for various one-off Connie versions. This plane, for example, had its own special fit and its own special mission. The equipment fitted to this plane was definitely non-standard in military terms. These 2-inch tape players were the ultimate in professional television formats at the time. The duty of the aircraft was to serve as television and radio broadcaster for the armed services networks. By hauling the transmission aloft, the service was taken out of range of the ECTON interference. Ground-based transmissions would have required infrastructure which, as a tempting target, would have needed constant guard. The quietly plodding Constellation transmitting from on high made the maintenance of the service broadcasts practical. Of course, most of the Constellation activity in Vietnam was far more actively involved in the conflict, with most of the important work being performed in monitoring the North Vietnamese. As soon as the operations over the North began, the Constellations became essential factors in the struggle. As the war went on, their role gradually evolved from passive to active involvement. Operating over their own ground, the North Vietnamese MiGs were given very accurate information about the whereabouts of U.S. aircraft in their airspace. This advantage was at first simply countered by the operations of the U.S. radar planes, which were able to relay similar information about MiG activity to the American strike aircraft. As the war went on, the Connies increasingly assumed a more active role, making direct contact with American fighters and guiding them in attack on any North Vietnamese activity. When the North became better equipped with missiles, the Connies were able to fix the location of any SAM site radars that were operating. This served two purposes. It warned the aircraft in the area to expect trouble, and it led the Iron Hand Weasels to attack the sites. The last Constellation operations in the theater were flown in May of 1974. Well after the last operational strikes by the U.S. forces, the big observers continued their monitoring. By then, it was 25 years after the first electronics refitted Connie, and so impressed the Navy. It was also 31 years after the first Constellation flight. When the Constellation was at its peak, the axe fell. They were forcibly retired from service long before they wore out. The major airlines were forced, partially for reasons of prestige, to abandon props. The Connies have been the key to the establishment of long-distance civil traffic after the war, but business has no place for soft sentiment, and they were abandoned quickly. By the early 60s, the civil career of the Constellation had moved to small airlines and lesser routes. There, they continued to work for many years. Gradually, they become relegated to cargo, and then lingered further as isolated crop dusters and fire tankers. The military career lasted much longer, with the last Navy Constellation being retired in June 1982. The last Constellation built had been delivered in 1958. 856 Connies were made in 16 years of production. Their career stretches from World War II to the Space Shuttle. They were, throughout their career, used as testbeds for a multitude of developments. The results of this service are still seen in use in both military and civil aviation today. One of the most beautiful aircraft ever produced, time reduced their worth to weight in metal. Very few escaped the scrap merchants, and now they're treasured museum pieces.
As we key up our video for our introduction video, I will recognize our Sleeping Dog Productions air-to-air TV crew and invite our guests to come out. We have an extremely talented production crew. Scott Guyat leads that team. Kyle Guyat does all the work taking care of everybody. Gentlemen, if you'd like to come out here, you can see the video screen, the Jumbotron here, and see the great work of Scott Guyat as we watch the introduction for the Constellation Bataan.
Down at Boeing Plaza tonight, there is a very rare and significant aircraft. It is the Lockheed VC-121A Constellation, serial number 48613, known as Bataan. In 1948, the U.S. Air Force ordered 10 Lockheed Model L-749 aircraft, the Graceful Constellation Airliner. They were delivered in 1948 and 1949 to Westover Air Force Base and the Atlantic Division of the Military Air Transport Command, MATS for short. Their Air Force designation was C-121A. One of the first major international crises of the Cold War began on June 24, 1948, when the Soviets closed all road, rail, and canal access to the parts of Berlin, Germany that were controlled by the Western Allies. The Berlin blockade left the people of West Berlin without their normal supplies of food, fuel, medicines, and other necessities. In response, the Western Allies organized the Berlin Airlift. Round-the-clock flights from England and the United States brought essential supplies to the people of West Berlin. The Lockheed Constellations, with their speed and long range, were ideal for moving supplies from the U.S. to Britain and to Germany during the Berlin Airlift. The Air Force's 8 C-121As, also known as Connies, made continuous crossings of the Atlantic Ocean, flying over 5 million miles to help deliver relief to West Berlin. When the airlift ended, the Connies were converted from cargo planes to high-speed VIP transports for the U.S. Air Force. In 1950, during the Korean War, Connie number 613 became the flying command post of General Douglas MacArthur, who was at the time Supreme Commander of Allied powers in Korea. MacArthur named his constellation Bataan after the Philippine Peninsula, known for the infamous Bataan Death March of 1942, when 75,000 American and Filipino prisoners of war were brutally force-marched more than 60 miles to captivity in POW camps. Subjected by Imperial Japanese troops to hunger, thirst, beatings, torture, and wanton killing, more than 5,000 Filipinos and 500 Americans died or were killed during the 8 days of the march. Many more would die in the POW camps of torture, starvation, or disease. In Korea, General MacArthur made 17 flights over the battlefields in his Connie, and she carried him to Wake Island for a meeting with U.S. President Harry Truman. On April 16, 1951, a fateful day for MacArthur, the Connie Bataan carried the general from Korea to Andrews Air Force Base in Maryland, where President Truman relieved him of his command. MacArthur then flew home to San Francisco, his last flight in the Connie. C-121A Bataan was assigned to the Pacific Air Command based in Hawaii. Her passengers included Generals Matthew Ridgway, Mark Clark, and Curtis LeMay, and South Korean President Syngman Rhee. In 1953, Bataan carried newly elected U.S. President Dwight Eisenhower and Vice President Richard Nixon on an inspection tour of Korea. All C-121s, including Bataan, were removed from Air Force rolls in 1966 and sent to the boneyard at Davis-Monthan Air Force Base in Tucson, Arizona. Several were stripped of military gear and sold to civilian operators in Canada for use as firebombers and bug sprayers. 3 Connies, including number 613 Bataan, were assigned to NASA for use during the Apollo space program. When the Apollo space program ended, NASA 422 was acquired by the Army Aviation Museum at Fort Rucker in Alabama and put on display out in the open, and there she sat for 20 years. Officials at Fort Rucker considered scrapping Bataan in 1993 until Ed Maloney, founder of the Planes of Fame Museum in Chino, California, offered to take possession of her. "That's a historic airplane," he told skeptical Steve Hinton, president of Planes of Fame. "We've got to find a way to do it." Planes of Fame traded a helicopter for the Connie, made her airworthy with help from Lockheed, repainted her in General MacArthur's colors, and took her on the airshow circuit. But flying her was costly, and after 1 year on the circuit, Bataan was grounded once again, perhaps permanently. Enter Rod Lewis, well-known aircraft collector and owner of Lewis Air Legends and the Air Legends Foundation. Lewis purchased Bataan in 2015 and hired Steve Hinton's Fighter Rebuilders Company to undertake Bataan's complete restoration. Finding parts wasn't easy, and few people knew anything about the 1950s-era airliner. Making Bataan flyable again was, said Hinton, like restoring 10 or 15 Mustangs. But despite the difficulties, Bataan once again took to the air on June 20th of this year, just in time for the trip to Oshkosh. She proudly wears the colors of General MacArthur's transport and will soon be given an all-new, historically correct interior. Lewis plans to fly Bataan to events around the U.S. and maybe Europe and beyond, so Bataan will be seen and appreciated by thousands thanks to Ed Maloney's vision to save her from scrappers and Rod Lewis's dream to bring this beautiful and historic airplane back to life.
Now you've heard the recorded history of Bataan. So, gentlemen, Rod, would you join me here, please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Which seat are we in?
How about this one right here for you,
Okay.
Rod?
Good. Sounds good.
Does that put you in, or would you rather be here in the shade?
No.
Okay.
I'm fine.
All right.
Thank you.
Steve, if you'll sit next to Rod, and we'll put Stuart on the end.
Okay.
That's a good place for you, isn't it? Ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to be here with these three gentlemen, Rod Lewis, Steve Hinton, and Stuart Dawson. They represent the warbird community and the professionals, the dedicated people who have done so much for all of the warbird aircraft, and now we have this Bataan. So, Rod, tell me, what possessed you to think that you wanted to restore something of this major undertaking?
You know, Connie, I'm honored here, first of all, to be here with my teammates to represent, you know, our airplane that's supposed to be here, should be here tomorrow, and your namesake. But I think I asked that question many times, actually. What possessed me to do this? I think it started probably in 2012. Steve and I made a trip over to the Ukraine, and we were looking for a large project. And in this case, it was a Tu-95 Bear. And we went over there, checked it out. It was nothing like we were told. Hadn't been flown in 10 years. We were told it was started up every 3 months. And so we got pretty discouraged after that, came home, and I asked Steve, what can we do that's a big project that we can enjoy as we get older and we can fly as a crew? And Steve came up with an idea that at his museum in Arizona that they had a Connie. So it just started from there, and Steve, you can pick it up and explain a little more.
That is a big project. And let me do just a little production here. If you guys would like to be in the shade, you could move your chairs up just a little bit if you'd like, and you'll be in the shadow of this beautiful Corsair that also happens to belong to Rod Lewis. But that just keeps you guys out of the sun a little bit. So much better, huh?
You okay?
Okay. Well, Rod's just going to leave you guys over there completely. So, okay. So, Steve. Okay. So, Steve, tell us about the project. The beginning with Ed Maloney, with his vision, was amazing.
Well, it's kind of funny story. You know, for the air race game, we're friends with Wiley Sanders Group out of Troy, Alabama there. And one day I got a phone call at the shop that from his guys said, you know what, Fort Rucker has this Constellation sitting there, and you know, it's probably available if you guys want it. You know, you're a museum and all, and we know you. And so I said, oh, I don't think so. I mean, we you know, we're strapped, just taking care of what we have. But anyway, I mentioned it to Ed Maloney the next day, and Ed just like, he stood up and says, really? He said, we got to get that airplane tonight. Is like, well, Ed, we can't afford to put that together. He says, we'll find a way. So anyway, against, I wasn't, you know, too convincing to talk him out of it, but God bless Ed for that. And that's what we did. And it turned out, it kind of unfolded because as we made a trade for it and we got it, and it just happened to be a retired vice president from Lockheed who lived in Ontario, California, north of Chino, heard that we had it. And he was actually a crew chief on the airplane when MacArthur had it. And so he, through his connections at Lockheed, organized some restoration, and we flew it to Dothan. Well, we sent our guys there for about 5 or 6 months to get it flying. It hadn't flown in almost 20 years. And put a crew together and flew it over to Dothan, and Dothan stripped all the NASA paint off of it and put in MacArthur's markings, and then it went to Addison, Texas, and they put an interior, replica of the MacArthur interior in it, and then it came to Chino. So we operated it for several air shows, but it just was very evident we could either fly the Connie or fly about 10 or 12 of the other airplanes. You know, that's what it would take to really maintain it correctly. So we ended up taking it out to our museum out in Arizona and put it on display. You know, it's a desert's a good place for an airplane like that, and then right on the highway and all. And then, like Rod had mentioned, our conversations, and we, you know, an aviation museum that we are, you know, we don't have excess funds, but Rod seemed kind of interested, and Rod went and looked at it, and we figured, well, it'd be worth our time, and Rod said he was willing to commit to it. And Rod is the hero in all this airplane, by the way. We did the work, but Rod was the one who stuck it out. You imagine funding a restoration shop for 8 years doing a Constellation, and it's you know, we went through the whole airplane. We, you know, rewired it. Well, we took everything out of it first. You know, we had the outer wings off, we had the landing gear out of it, we had all the engines off, and went through an 8-year process getting it all back together, and real happy with where we are right now. So we're anxious to get it here so you can all see it.
Well, it's certainly from the pictures, I know where everyone is really looking forward to seeing it, because it is beautiful. Stuart, you have the pleasure of flying it. So tell us a little bit. I know you fly a lot of airplanes. So how does the Bataan compare?
Well,
or does it?
I flew a lot of 4-engine stuff hauling freight, you know, early in my life, and but I never had a hold of a Connie, and it is amazing what that airplane will do. It really will get on down the road. It runs fast. It's a little bit heavy to fly, but that's hydraulics from the 40s, you know. That's the way it was.
I believe the airplane, speaking of fast, I believe it set a few speed records in its day, and it really is ahead of its time as far as when it was designed and when it was used.
Yeah, this thing, if you fill it up, you can run 20 hours on it.
I don't think we don't sign me up, right?
And you really don't want to fill it up.
No.
You don't want to pay that bill.
No, I don't want to pay that bill either. You know, I don't know that anybody would. So, Rod, tell me, I mean, I know you're disappointed the airplane is not here today, but it will be here tomorrow. They had a little hiccup. I think Bernie called that a hiccup earlier today in one of their airplanes. So you do have hiccups with these old airplanes. So you have to be extremely proud that this project has come to fruition.
Well, thank you. It's not complete yet. As mentioned in the video, we don't have a complete interior, but as soon as the interior gets finished, it should be a really, really nice airplane. It is already. And proof of that it does fly, a video. So, so we've got, first of all, I'm not the hero. These guys that worked 8.5 years, we worked 8 months just to get it airworthy, to fly it from Arizona to Chino. And those guys were super dedicated every day working on this airplane. Got it to Chino, and then 8 years later, we June 20th, we finally got to fly it for the first time. I was in a chase plane, and a lot of those videos were from that day. But I'm very proud of mainly the team that's put this all together, and them sticking with it, because there were some hard times, especially during COVID. Couldn't get parts, couldn't get people. You know, it was just very tough, and it went right through COVID. Steve did all he could to just keep it running, you know. So I want to thank them.
Well, yeah,
And
you
his
know,
guys.
we should all, you know, any of us who fly airplanes, we don't recognize the crew chiefs and the maintenance people often enough, but they're the guys that keep us going. And of course, Steve does all of it with his team. How many people do you have working there in Chino, or do you know?
It goes on. We always have around 10 to 14, kind of, right? But we had at times we had 14 people working on this. You can imagine, you know, when you drill skins off and you're removing parts and cleaning parts and looking for parts, and it really goes on and on and on. Vintage radials, excuse me. Mike Nixon did the engines for us, and they're a hybrid engine. They used the power case and nose case off of the latest turbo compounded 3350 and put it on the early blower so it all fit in the same cowling and the same engine mount. And, you know, we just have a lot of experience through the years, and we found ways to make it happen. We modified the electrical system. You can imagine the 1940s, 50s electrical system. There were wires, I mean 1,000 pounds of wires going through that thing, you know, because it was pressurized and heated and air conditioned and of that era. And we made it more like a warbird. We wanted to make it as simple as we could so we can maintain it. So it's we're real proud of what we've done, and when you see it, you'll agree it's a really, really nice, detailed airplane. And another thing too, we got to match the rest of Rod's airplanes. You know, when Rod, every one of Rod's planes is a gem, and we just want to make sure that we keep that.
Well, there's
for Rod.
Well, you're right. You have a high standard here with the Lewis collection to live up to. So, if I understood you correctly, these engines are for this airplane. They are specific to this constellation.
Yeah, but I mean, they're the parts that are available, and it's not a major change in any way. We use the reduced power settings that were assigned to that earlier engine. It's still a 2,500 horsepower engine, but the parts are a 3,500 horsepower engine. So they're the very latest evolution of that right cyclone 3350. And Vintage Radials has the largest inventory of that. Part of our deal with him is he would use as many new parts as he could, and most of the engines have all new, cranks, rods, cylinders, and cases. They're like new stuff. It really is, and it's really clean. It doesn't drip much oil, and we're used to working with 3350s on Sky Raiders that are always oily and spitting everywhere. You see in the video there, when it starts up, it looks kind of like it just spits smoke out. It doesn't even spit oil out. We're really impressed with it. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. As you say, radials, if it has any oil in it, you're going to see some of that oil coming out.
50-gallon oil.
You better see some out. Better see some come out.
It better, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, Stu, tell us again your impression of the engines, the operation of the airplane. So what's different about operating this airplane, say, than a single-engine airplane with this basic same engine?
Well, we've got 4 of them to take care of.
Yeah, all right.
And it takes 3 people to fly this airplane, a pilot, co-pilot, and then you've got an engineer. And the engineer basically operates everything. You start and initiate what we're doing, like takeoff power, and he sets it. And anything you want and you need, you just tell the engineer and they'll do it. So it's really, you got to get coordinated. Everybody's got to work together on this thing.
Well, so it's very important. You call for the power and the
You
engineer
call for what
takes-
you want and he will give it to you.
So is your engineer? No, I'm sure your engineer's still over with the airplane, probably.
Yeah, he's still with the
So
airplane.
we can say thank you to him because he's probably the most important part of this.
They're working real hard.
Yeah. That's really good. Steve, would you make a shout out to anyone else here in the audience or any of your crew who made this possible? What was a high point and a low point in this 8-year restoration?
Well, when you say a high point, well, when Stu and I shoved the throttles up for takeoff, and we both looked at each other. Boy, this thing goes. It hit 100 knots and 1,500 feet. We were kind of okay. Let's go. It was really surprising, but we were 50,000 pounds below gross weight, so that's part of it. But that was probably the high point of the whole thing coming together, and we finally flying the airplane. And like Rod said, the low point during the COVID years, everybody is struggling, and we were down about it, but we all stuck with it, and we had so much enthusiasm with the people that we were doing business with. Everybody's excited about being involved with the Constellation. So,
sure, yeah. and it is gorgeous. So, who polished this airplane?
There was a company that was hired to do it, and they polished. There was 9 people on it for 8 weeks, and it was done there at Chino, and they made a big giant mess. It was just that fuzz going everywhere. But and they were every day black face, from all the polish. But they were smiling. Everybody loved working on it. It really did.
Well, yeah, that's a big. I mean, you can polish a prop and be worn out, if you're one individual. So I can see where you hire somebody.
Yeah, when Rod came up with a paint job, everybody's got polish. Ooh. But I'm glad he did because it really makes the airplane. It's beautiful.
Okay, Rod, tell us. I mean, we covered a lot of the history of the airplane in the video, but tell us what part of the history means the most to you, or led you to make sure you replicated the MacArthur years.
I think just basically that it was MacArthur's kind of office in the sky, and it flew to many different important areas of the world, and I think I just wanted to make sure that we were representing MacArthur properly, and just wanted it just like it was or better. So.
Well, and that's what we do here in Warbirds in Review. It's history, heritage, and the heroes. Yeah. And you certainly helped us on many occasions to present that and record this for generations to come, so that they'll know what these airplanes did and what they meant. And so, okay, so tell me a little bit about this airplane while we have it sitting here. We don't want to just ignore it. I mean, it's pretty nice too.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's one of the first Warbirds that I bought. I think I had to buy this to get a Bearcat. So I bought a -1 Bearcat with this, probably in it was 20 years ago. So I'd always wanted a Corsair, always wanted a Bearcat, so the package deal was just perfect.
Perfect. So what was your first Warbird?
First Warbird was actually a T-28C, and I flew that for many years. Bought that in 1994 and brought it to Oshkosh. Did some work on it, brought it to Oshkosh, and it won best T-28 in 1995. And then my second Warbird was a Whirlaway to get some tail wheel time. And that was a beautiful airplane. George Baker out of Florida built that one. And just loved flying that. And then kind of my next one was an NA-50. And then I guess the following was a Mustang. Then I finally got to a Mustang. So.
Okay, Stuart, what was the first Warbird, or what was the first airplane that you flew at what age?
I went to the airport when I was 16 because I had to have a job. I couldn't put gas in my car, and I never left. I just stayed there, and I worked there doing the line and fueling airplanes, and learned how to fly. and just never went up, never stopped.
You never grew up.
Never grew up.
Never grew up. That's a good thing.
Don't want to.
Yeah, Steve, we've heard over the years the Chino boys or the Ed Maloney guys. Tell me a little bit about the history of Chino and Ed Maloney and you guys that worked as line boys. I understand out there.
Well, I actually started way before that. We were just, excuse me, when I was in second grade. When the nun left I tell everybody when the nun leaves, right, you go on the chalkboard, you start drawing airplanes, right? But there was a kid on the third row over from me that could draw better airplanes than I could, and that was Jim Maloney. That was Ed's son and my wife's father. So, and in a young age, I just had the opportunity. Ed opened the door for Jim and I to, be part of the museum. And when you're 8 or 9 years old and hanging around the museum, all you're doing is, causing problems for the people that are serious about it. But you grow up and a lot of great mentors. I actually got a late start flying. I was 15 the first time I ever left in an airplane, ever flew in an airplane. But like 3-4 years later, I'm flying a Mustang. So, and the first time I came to Oshkosh was 50 years ago.
Wow.
Yeah, I brought P-51 here, Leroy Penhal's Mustang, and then Jim was flying the museum's Hellcat. So.
Oh, no, I'm not going to count.
73. 1973.
1970. Well, that's pretty impressive. And you've been here a lot of the
probably
years.
Majority of the times, yeah.
Majority of the times. Well,
first time I ever got paid to fly an airplane, I got flying an F-86 for Bob Hoover. In 1974, I brought an F-86er. Yeah, that white one with the red stripe. If you ever see an old picture with a kid that working on it, that was me.
All right. Well, Bob Hoover was a mentor for a lot of people and had a lot of good words of wisdom. And it was really neat to know some of these people. And that's what we're glad we've preserved, their history and their stories here. And now we carry on with the airplanes. And tomorrow you have to see a lot of the Corsairs out here. I asked Rod earlier. I don't know. The question was kind of like, why is the Corsair here? And he said, because you asked me to bring it, so, okay. So what can we look for next year, Rod? I don't know how you top a Constellation.
Well, next year we'll have a full-blown completed Connie, first of all.
Yeah, with interior.
Yeah, with an interior in it, with 24 seats, actually. So, I don't know. Depends on what you're doing next year and what you need.
That's what I asked for. I have to be careful what you ask for here. Okay, so this is going to be a shorter than normal Warbirds in Review because it is the afternoon, and they're going to start the night show here in just a little while. But would you guys be open to offering it out for questions if we have anybody who has a question out there?
Sure.
We take this. I don't know that I have my mic handlers yet, but maybe if you raise your hand, I can walk over and there you go, a close one. That's good. Okay.
Is there a time for it to arrive tomorrow?
Is there a time for it to arrive tomorrow?
Hopefully, it's going to be in the morning. We're waiting and coordinating this with the people where the aircraft is now, but it's up, and we're going to get over as quick as we can to get it back here.
Okay, this gentleman.
I'm a young warbird buff. I love it. And how do you recommend a young person get into warbirds?
Steve, you're probably the one.
You got to make yourself available, and okay, you start at the bottom. I mean, you meet people and offer to help, and find somebody you're comfortable with, some group you're comfortable with. It's there's a lot of great people right here in this audience too. You could probably make a nuisance of yourself and get in somehow.
Okay.
Is Mike live? Okay. Yes, I was going to ask that in the movie The Aviator, they happened to have the Connie and they were talking about having the berths. And so I wanted to know, is it going to be buttons or snaps?
Don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, and while we're waiting for the next question, I think we recognize Steve. In the morning, we're going to have Adam Makos here for Devotion with the Corsairs, and Steve had a lot to do with the Devotion movie. Tell us, are you planning a movie with a Constellation with the Bataan, you think? Or let's write a script, huh?
Yeah.
Maybe we should.
Yeah, maybe we should. Let's do it. Hey, you haven't done that yet, have you? Doing movies?
No,
Hey, Rod, old
it's
buddy.
not for me.
Yeah. No, Devotion was a great project. You know, we got a phone call, and Fred Smith from FedEx wanted to come out and talk about Devotion with his two daughters. They have a production company called Black Label. And so Fred shows up with his two daughters. I mean, they're regular company, but anyway, he wanted to talk about doing this movie. He says it's a great book, and my wife Karen had read the book, and she says she was so excited about it because it's a best-selling book, and it's a great story. Funny part, we talked a little bit in the office, and then started. I took Fred and his the people for a tour, and I went to our first hangar and talked about the airplanes. And Fred Smith, everybody knows who he is, right? FedEx. He's the fellow that started FedEx. Anyway, he looked out there, and we have an OV-1 in the corner outside. Hey, I used to work on those things. Anyway, for the next 45 minutes, he gave the tour at the museum. He knew every airplane we had. I couldn't believe it. He was just talk. Quite a personality. But a year later, Kevin LaRosa Jr., who you probably met, who's a young aerial director now, and an outstanding person and very accomplished aviator as well. He was assigned as aerial coordinator on the show, and so we sat down and figured out, first of all, what's the budget? It could go on and on. Yeah, you start with several people that are here. We've even talked to them about using our airplanes, but then of course they narrow it down. But we ended up with 3 Corsairs that we used for the whole show. We started in Wenatchee, Washington, Korea. Did a lot of flying there. We were there at the airport for Wenatchee. I think we were there for about 5 weeks, I think. Some days it was snowing, couldn't do it. Some days it was a nice day, or we just bared down and did it. And we had the Corsairs and had a Sky Raider from Ericsson. So we had Ericsson's Corsair, Ericsson Sky Raider. We had our museum F4U1. Dan Freakin's F4U4, and then we brought our MiG-15 up there too to do some scenes. And then from there we went to Pasco, Washington, and did all that stuff. If you watch the movie around the river and the lake, did it there. And then we took a break for a little while and got the Bearcats and Rod Sea Fury, and we went to Savannah with the Corsairs, and we based out of Savannah. And we set up Rod Sea Fury. He has a 2-place Sea Fury. Took the instrument panel out of the back and painted the tail blue, and we put the actors in the back of the Sea Fury. And John Maloney and I did the Bearcat scenes. If you see the movie, some of the best Bearcat stuff you'll see. Anyway, we did so much stuff, and of course they only used 5 minutes, but we had a ball. When you're doing a movie, you get to do stuff that's way, kind of usually illegal, but you got a waiver to do. But buzzing the beach and looping and rolling and formation rolls and stuff like that. They used a few little things, but it was a real great experience, and it was great income for the museum, and all our guys were working on it. It was a great show, and Rod let us take some vacation away from the Connie for a couple months. That was a big deal, but it was a good movie, and unfortunately it has a really sad ending, but we're real proud of it.
Well, I think we can all be proud of the integrity of the people like Jesse Brown and Tom Hudner, who are veterans and fly for their buddies. That's what Bud Anderson says. I was flying for my buddies, and a lot of them didn't come home. So to our veterans, we owe a great debt, and to you guys. And I wanted to bring that in for the interaction and the connections of all the Warbird people. I see the Warbird people out here who also operate these airplanes. It's a very close-knit community, and everybody is. Warbirds is a little different because we are here to showcase the airplanes in tribute to all the people who served. And I know we have oh, do I have to go to that question now? Mr. Roush has a question. I'm sorry, you're trumped. Mr. Roush.
I want to make a statement about the museum, my first contact with it. I started drag racing nationally in '76, and the first time I hit the West Coast, I was at Pomona and they had the Hellcat on the display at the grandstands, which was piqued my interest. And I went looking for the museum after practice one day, and I went found Chino, and the B-17 was outside. And do you still have the same B-17?
Same one, yeah.
I asked if I could go through it, and the person I was talking to, whose name I never knew, said I could, but I had to leave a $5 contribution for the museum. So I got my $5 down, and he opened up the B-17, and I went through it for about 30 minutes. And really enjoyed my first trip to California, my first visit to an aircraft museum, and my first exposure to Chino. Thanks, guys. You have a lot of people that come to your community first and wind up in your museum. And if you're still doing what you did in those days, you're making the hits with the people that are impressed by it.
Thank you, Jack. Thank you.
Thanks, Jack. Yeah, these museums throughout the country are just so valuable. I see Ron Fagan sitting right there. They have an amazing museum in Granite Falls, as do many of the people here have the aircraft in the museums. And the question there, Mary, I think you have a gentleman that would like to ask a question.
Yes, I have one question. Connie, I think, knows where I'm going to go with this, but and this is directed primarily to Rod, I think, and it's not so much as a question as an observation. And we talked of the mission of the C-121, and the Navy flew it also, of course. And I was privy to watching the film and when it was retired, etc. And I was kind of surprised when they said in 1966, I think it was retired from the inventory. And I looked at Connie and I said, well, I said, there's another variant out there that flew a lot longer than that. In fact, in the Navy, it truly flew longer than that. But I was stationed in Keflavik Naval Air Station in Iceland, and I was flying Phantoms at the time. And for early warning, what do I see sitting on the ramp but a 121? Of course, it was a little bit different. It had an EC before it, and it had the hump on the back, and it had the dish on the bottom. And that was our early warning. That was like 1978, I do believe. And a lot of people here don't probably realize that that is truly a warbird version. And it was utilized a great deal in Vietnam also, again, for early warning. And of course, you know, it was replaced by AWACS, and the Navy had some E2s that were used also. But I think it's important to note that, yeah, that truly is a warbird variant, and really it helped me. As a Phantom guy, my radar would only look so far, you know, and then their call sign was Adola. The Adola guys would start talking to us, and they go, hey, and we were intercepting Bear bombers at the time, and here are these Bear bombers way out there, and they knew it. We didn't, you know. They got us close, and we said, okay, we got it now, and off we went. But yeah, I thank you also for the restoration, for bringing it to note. But I think it is also important that people realize that, hey, this thing with a great big hump on the back and a dish on the bottom really helped out a lot of us fighter pilots all the way through about 1978, I want to say.
Well, that's great to know. Thank you.
And your airplane, it served in Vietnam with transporting people who were a very important part of that. So Rod, if we, did I have another question? Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, young man up top.
First, I just want to say thank you to everyone here and everyone that's not here for bringing the Constellation. That's always been one of those iconic, legendary aircraft that I never thought I'd get a chance to see fly, and it looks like tomorrow's going to be that day. So sorry if I sound like a kid in the candy store, because that's exactly what I am. But to piggyback off the first question, as far as leaving during one of the air shows, is that still planned for Friday, or you're doing Saturday, or is that kind of fluid right now? Because I'm leaving Sunday, so I was hoping to catch it on one of those 2 days.
Do you still think, are you leaving Friday, or do you know?
Excuse me.
Rod can take that.
Probably, since we're arriving so late, we're thinking about Saturday departure.
Actually, we're looking for donations to fill it up with fuel.
Exactly.
No, I'm kidding.
We'll stay a lot longer.
I'm totally kidding. So along those lines, how much fuel does this airplane hold? I'm talking gallons, not dollars in today's dollars.
965 gallons.
I'm sorry, I stepped on you. Say that.
About $75,000 worth. No, it's 5,900 gallons. Yeah.
Yeah, 6,000 gallons.
And you're burning how much per hour?
Well, it depends on where the throttles are, but flying here we were 100 gallons an hour.
100 gallons an hour.
1,330 horsepower cruise, and it was indicating 250 knots across the ground.
Yeah, we were running 260 sometimes across the ground.
Yeah.
And we were burning 400 to 420 an hour.
Yeah, total, all four.
Total.
All four, yeah. Well, it's good to have all four. Not
Yeah.
absolutely necessary, but it's good to burn 400 gallons an
Got
hour.
50-gallon oil tanks, too, so it can stay up. Yeah.
Actually, I've seen a video where they've shut down 3 engines and it'll fly on 1 engine.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's in YouTube. Arthur Godfrey is talking about Super Connie, the most safest airliner in the world, and he goes, "Watch this." It's like, okay, here it
I
goes.
hate it when they say, "Watch this."
Yeah, I know. It's like, ugh.
Well, I guarantee you they didn't have very much fuel on board.
Yeah, I guarantee you.
They
Probably
and
get
it
it
probably-
right over Edwards Air Force Base too.
Yeah, they had places to land
Yeah, right,
if they needed to. So, Rod, any closing comments?
I just want to thank the crew, the guys that aren't here. That was a good point. They're obviously working the hardest. We're over here kind of relaxing for the day anyway. So, but we'll get right back over there in the morning and join them. Want to thank them. Thank you for inviting us and having us here. And you guys have anything to add?
Just like I say, we got some famous people in the audience, and I
Yeah.
thank you for all you guys do, and thanks for
sure. Yeah.
And we're
Giving
going to
us a
get the
purpose.
Connie here tomorrow.
Yeah. And Stuart, as the pilot, is there anything I've missed that you think people would be interested in knowing about the airplane?
They just need to come look at this thing.
Yeah.
It's really impressive. It is really impressive. If you like airplanes and you don't like the Connie, there's something wrong with you.
Yeah. Well, I mean, who wouldn't like a Connie?
Yeah.
That's right.
You led me into that. That was not planned. Guys, Rod, Steve, Stu, thank you. I mean, ladies and gentlemen, it's been my honor, and I thank you for all of you being here late afternoon looking into the sun. But thank you guys so much. This is going to be really special to see you come in tomorrow. You have to let us know what time you're coming, okay?
Okay, one more thing. I want to thank my wife for letting me do
Karen.
this. Thanks, honey.
Karen.
She's always patting me on the back. As long as I come home happy, she's happy.
Yeah, it was really her dad that's responsible
Absolutely.
for most
Right.
of this, right? So
Aviation wives are really understanding.
Well, the first time we left the Chino pattern and we were buzzed Santa Maria Airport. I don't see Chris. He was here a minute ago. But on the way back, it just slapped on me, or I said dawned on me. I slapped myself in the face because I got a tear in my eye thinking about Ed because, I almost argued with him. We don't need this thing, It's like, but here we go. Thanks, Ed. He knew better than me for sure.
He knew more than you did.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
Yes.